Welcome back. Approximately 10 sessions ago, we considered Jesus' question at the end of the parable of the persistent widow, where he stated, "Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he really find faith on the earth?" From there, we considered Jesus' desire for faith in those who follow him and approach him. We then considered some encounters that he had with those who approached him in faith. Today, I'd like to begin looking at the priority that prayer was in the life of Jesus himself, considering the importance that Jesus placed upon spending time in personal fellowship with the Father. Lord willing, we will consider the Lord's priority on prayer over the next 8 to 10 sessions. Today, I would like to begin by going back to the encounter that Jesus had with the leper, who acknowledged that if Jesus was willing, he could make him clean. This time, we want to look at it from Luke's perspective, the account that Luke wrote beginning in verse 12 of chapter 5, where we read, "And it happened, when he, that is Jesus, was in a certain city, that behold, a man who was full of leprosy saw Jesus, and he fell on his face and implored him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Then he, that is Jesus, put out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. Immediately the leprosy left him, and he charged him to tell no one, but go, show yourself to the priest, and make an offering for your cleansing, as a testimony to them, just as Moses commanded. However, the report went around concerning him all the more, and great multitudes came together to hear and to be healed by him of their infirmities. So he himself often withdrew into the wilderness and prayed." If you remember the account of Matthew, Jesus was surrounded by a multitude when the leper came to Jesus. Could you imagine the amazement that would have taken over the crowd when they saw this leper become cleansed? I can't imagine. Remember, this leper would have had to yell, "Unclean, unclean, unclean," and the people potentially would have been stoning him in order to get him away. But Jesus, breaking through the crowd, would have come to this leper, the leper falling on his face before Jesus, saying, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. And Jesus, in the midst of all these people, reached out and touched the leper, touched the unclean leper, and said, I'm willing, be cleansed. At that moment, there were a lot of things that would have been going on. This leper would have been leaping and excited and joyous. Jesus told him to go show himself to the priests, offer the sacrifice that was commanded by Moses to do. People would have been checking him out to find out whether he was really healed. And in the midst of all this, rather than relishing in the publicity of the moment, Jesus retreated to the fellowship of his Father. It says in verse 16, so he himself often withdrew into the wilderness and prayed. That in this moment he did what was often his habit. In these moments, he would withdraw into the wilderness, into a solitary place, in order that he might spend some personal, intimate fellowship with the Father. In Philippians chapter 2, Paul writes regarding the deity and humanity of Christ. Beginning at verse 5, we read, Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant and becoming in the likeness of men. There are numerous words for the word form in the Greek, and it's important to understand what's being stated in that passage. It says, Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the morphe of God. The morphe is the form you are in your very nature, who you are in your very being and essence. So we talk about the word metamorphosis, the very nature of something being changed. Jesus was in his very nature, his very being, God, in such a way that he did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, because his claiming to be God would have been thievery, because it wasn't his to claim. But it wasn't robbery for him to do that, because he was God. Rather than being in the very nature God, he made himself of no reputation. We read in the New King James, the New American Standard states that he emptied himself. The word there is the word kanao, which literally means to empty something of meaning, of purpose. That Jesus emptied himself. He voided himself of the deity that he had when he came to the earth. He still was all-knowing. He still had authority and power. But when he went from Godhead to humanity, and in him still was the fullness of Godhead bodily, he emptied himself in order that he might take on the fullness of our humanity. He made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant and coming in the likeness of men. He took on the schemati of a man, the outward appearance of a man, but also then the homoiomate, the likeness of a man. He understood, he took on our humanity that he might understand what we go through and live it in the way that we live it. So when Jesus was there in the crowd, surrounded by that crowd, when that leper came to him, all the emotions and all the battles that were going on in the crowd, he understood. Hence Jesus took that moment when he needed rest, as he was off to do, withdrew himself into the wilderness to pray, to take time to be alone with the Father. When you're stressed, when there are a lot of things going on and you just want to get away from it all, where do you turn? Where do you retreat? Where do you look for rest? I want to challenge you to turn to the Father, to look to He who created the heavens and the earth, and who loves you with an everlasting love, who paid the adoption price for you, that he might receive you as his own child, and wants to spend time of fellowship with you. Take some time to pray. Go to the Lord. Go to the Father for rest, for a retreat, to find in him your restoration. And have a blessed day.